Welcome to the With Winning in Mind podcast. I am Heather Sumlin, your host for today, and today I'm interviewing Teah Anders. Teah is one of our Mental Management Certified Instructors. She has been doing nose work, canine nose work, for almost since the sport began. And she's a coach. She does technical training as well as mental training. She has been involved in dog sports for 2 decades. I am so incredibly excited to get to know her better and to let you get to know her as well and learn a little about nose work. Some of the things that we talk about in this interview are really how she handles maybe difficult conversations. How does she use mental management for that? What are things that she's learned about applying mental management to her sport? And I think no matter whether you're a dog sport handler or not, you might find something of value. So please take the time to watch. If you are not a Patreon member, please consider joining our Patreon membership. For our silver and gold level members, we have extended interviews. I spent a lot of time with Teah today talking about how she applies mental management in competition. What does she do with her downtime? How does she handle those hours and when she's not competing? And how did she handle transitioning from one dog to another and having to become a beginner all over again? So there's so many wonderful things that you can learn if you're a Patreon member. We'd love to have you join our family. Have a great time watching this. Like it if you do, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Teah. It's so good to have you on our show today.
Thank you.
Tell me, okay, you have become a certified coach. How many years ago did you become a certified coach?
10 years ago. This is my 10th, 2023 is my 10th year.
That's so incredible. So
yeah, I was in your first group of certified coaches.
We launched a certified coaches program. Yeah, I guess it was 2013. And there was a small group that came to that first round of training, and Teah and her husband Chuck were in that class.
Yes, we were.
So incredibly cool. And you've stuck it out with us all of these years, and you've been teaching mental management to people. And so let's do a little bit of background. Tell me a little bit about your competitive experience. How did you get started in dog sports? All of those type of things.
Well, I'm a dog trainer, and I had a dog training facility in California for 21 years. I opened it in 1999. And to be totally honest with you, I kind of avoided competition, the first 5 years or so, because I was really focusing on pet dogs and their people. And so a lot of puppy classes, basic classes, feisty Fidos classes, those kinds of things. And then I was introduced to musical canine freestyle in 2005. And that's actually the year I found out about Lanny and mental management. I was introduced to some of the concepts by Chris Hurley, who competed in musical canine freestyle. And as soon as I learned about it, I was really excited about it. And so I did musical canine freestyle for a while. And then in 2008, I discovered what then was a brand new sport, canine nose work. And the minute I stepped into a seminar, I was like, this is for me. I want to know how to teach it. So I drove to LA for a year every week from here, which is about a 4-hour drive each way. And I trained with the founders of this sport, Amy Hero, Joe Marie, and Ron. And it was very exciting, and began teaching it in 2009. So I've been at it about 14 years now. And nose work is really my favorite sport. And that's the one that I probably have done most of my work in, as far as mental management. When I go to seminars, of course, it's for all dog handlers. Mm-hmm. And yet I've focused a lot on nose work.
So for those of us who don't run dogs, don't train dogs, know nothing about dog sports, can you explain the difference between what is musical canine freestyle, what is nose work? Because those terms are probably very foreign to a lot of people who might be watching.
Well, musical canine freestyle, people usually roll their eyes, at least they used to, about it. It's actually a musical choreographic routine with basically dogs doing behaviors or tricks to music with the handler.
It's like doggy dancing, right?
Oh, you're dancing with your dog, and people start laughing. But actually, it's not an easy sport. You often will go out and do as many as 30 or 40 behaviors in a 3-minute competition with no reinforcement. And so you really have to work with the dog to be very good on the behaviors, and the handler has to be aware of what's going on and be in time with the music and remember what their routine is. So there's a lot to it. And that was really my training ground in competition because I hadn't competed before. In canine nose work, what that's about is really about the dog using their nose, and they're very good at that. So what we do in a typical National Association of Canine Scent Work trial, or even now the AKC trials, is we set up different hides. They're put in different kinds of elements. In NACSW, it's exterior, interior vehicles and containers, and they're hides. And of course, the handler doesn't know where they are. So you enter a search area, and your dog needs to find the hide and indicate to the handler that they found it, and you need to call it correctly. So it's a different kind of sport because nose work, the reason I love it so much is it's one where the dog actually leads in the competition and you are the support role. The handler is the support role. And so it's different than many dog sports where the handler is cueing the dog. Like in agility or in obedience, the handler is responsible for cueing the dog. It's different in nose work. We need to follow the dog. So it's very exciting. And it's a whole different kind of mental game. And I've competed with 3 dogs in canine nose work over the last 14 years. And one of mine, we competed elite level. And I just have a new dog I'm starting out, and we're in NW2. So starting off with a new dog. And I teach canine nose work and have been since 2009. I'm also a certifying official for the national organization, NACSW, and a judge.
Oh my goodness. So all things nose work, you have the answers.
Well, I've got a lot of them. I don't know if I've got all of them, but I've got a lot of them.
I have a question. Is it difficult to go from being a handler in a dog sport where you're doing the cueing and then transition to nose work where you're reading the dog and the dog is leading? I feel like that could be a difficult transition. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I believe it is a difficult transition, especially for handlers that have been involved for a long time in sports where they've been the one doing the cueing. And it's been about precision training of different behaviors and those kinds of things. When they go into nose work to learn to be more hands off and allow the dog to do the searching is a different concept for people. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of time for people to learn to kind of step back. And nose work is interesting because in the beginning levels, I'd say that the dog really is handling the brunt of things. As you get to the more complicated searches, NW3, Elite, and Summit, then really the handler and their attitude becomes even more important because you're in the support role. And so you need to be very positive and aware of what you're doing and connected with your dog.
So when you started to apply the mental management strategies, you already had some of those strategies before you started nose work, right?
I did, although at that time, I had listened to the CDs of With Winning in Mind and some of the, what every dog competitor needs to know about freestyle and agility in different sports. And I really immediately picked up on the reinforcement phase. That just spoke to my listening immediately. And I improved my performance right away just from really getting that. Although when I started nose work, it was very different. It was very different because it's a very long mentally, you have to have a lot of mental endurance on a nose work day in National Association of Canine Scent Work, because you might be out there for 6 or 7 hours and maybe you only search for, I don't know, 5 to 15 minutes of that. The rest of the time you're waiting for your next turn. And in the higher levels, NW3 and above, you don't really know how you've done.
Right.
So it's very different than going out and doing a routine or like in agility, people get to walk the course. They see other competitors running. They know what they're going to be doing. in nose work, there are so many unknowns because, of course, you don't know where the hide is going to be. And so I found that I really had to start adjusting my mental management and learning how to use it in this kind of sport. And that's when I went to Lanny in 2013 and took training and then became a certified coach because I thought I really want to delve into this and learn more about it.
So when I think about that long day, and when you said, it's more private, right? So you can't watch someone else and get any type of inkling into, there's no strategy watching someone else. Like in agility, you might be able to watch and see where dogs might be struggling with some things or something you
Yep.
may have missed in your walkthrough, and so you can adjust your strategy. But for you can't do that.
No.
You have to determine, how are we going to search this area and be ready for it and trust in that.
Yeah, the strategy is interesting in nose work because for most of us, and it probably isn't true of everyone, but most of us who do nose work, our first strategy is to let the dog lead and be the support role. Although you have to have your backup strategies ready. So if let's say you've gone into a large exterior search that you've been given 3 minutes, and let's say you're out there for a minute and your dog hasn't found anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you better have a backup strategy. How are you gonna handle that? You're gonna um, go through the middle, do the whole perimeter of the area, go back, check your threshold and your corners. You better have some kind of strategy ready. Sometimes you walk right in, your dog finds the hide or hides immediately, and you don't have much time for strategy, just being in the support role and knowing when to call your alert.
Mm-hmm.
When you really believe your dog has made that commitment to having found the odor.
When you're in the downtime, in between searches, are there a lot of distractions that happen in this environment, and how do you handle that?
Yes, I would say there are a lot of distractions at most for most people in a nosework trial. The way I handle it is I really go in. Mental management is a really big part of my goal for myself as a handler during the day. So I have my mental management routine that I go through, and I make sure that I have some quiet time in my car, to really work on my preload and get ready for my mental management system. And then after I've run the search, I go back and I reload that search. And I do that in my car where I've got some quiet time privately to myself. The other kinds of distractions that go on is that inadvertently we're not supposed to talk about the highs when we're at nosework trials, but inadvertently, people will talk. They're not giving away the hide location, but they'll walk out of their containers and go, "Oh man, I blew it. That was so hard." And as a handler, if you haven't gone yet, you're hearing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a lot of work with myself mentally in either turning around what people are saying. I
Mm-hmm.
think to myself, we're ready for this challenge. I've worked containers, whatever they've got for me, I'm ready. And I don't buy in to like the fear factor of it was a tough hide. Or if I'm around people in the parking lot that are being negative about either the day or other trials, I just very politely excuse myself and go
Mm-hmm.
back to my car and work with my own mental system and do the things that make me feel positive and happy and connected with my dog during a trial.
I love that you turn it around. So I think it's so incredibly important. We can be around negative people and not take in their negativity.
Right. And then the other distractors are, of course, really the physical environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, if it's cold or hot or raining or the wind is blowing really hard, it's really easy for those fear thoughts to creep into your mind. Like, let's say a real typical one in California is often afternoons are windy.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say you've got your vehicle search in the afternoon and you're looking at your weather app and you're thinking, man, the wind is really picking up. If you start dwelling on that kind of thing and thinking, oh, it's going to be hard, it makes your search so much more difficult. So we want to not let those literally those environmental cues of the environment itself get in our way. We have to know that we've trained for all weather situations
Mhm.
and that we're going to go out with our dog and we're both going to do our best. And maybe even that the weather situation will help us instead of buying into the distraction of it being negative.
You mentioned earlier that you listened to With Winning in Mind on CD because back in the day it was on CD.
Yeah, yeah,
For those of you who want to be able to listen to With Winning in Mind, it's now on Audible. And then the what every canine freestyle handler should know first, or what every agility competitor should know first. There's actually a nosework version that you and I worked on together, which is
yes.
was so incredibly fun. Those audios are currently only available on our Patreon membership, which I'll put a link to in the comment section or in the notes section of this video, where you can become a member, essentially either bronze, silver, or gold level. And they're available at the bronze level. All three levels have access to those. I learned a lot about nosework just in general working with you on that project because I
Yeah.
had no clue. I mean, I have dogs, but I don't run them. And so watching, the complexities of the sport is pretty intense. So let's talk about how you connect the mental game to nose work as a coach. So you came to mental management to become certified. First of all, what led you to believe, okay, I want to teach this? What was that first?
Well, what was happening for me, like I said, I had some understanding of mental management, what I had gleaned on my own through some
Mm-hmm.
material and my own experience. And I was having a hard time initially applying it to nosework because it is such, like I said, such a different kind of sport. We don't know what we're really up against on the day. So when we come into things like our visualization before we do the search, well, it's a different kind of visualization because you don't know where the height is. You don't know how many or if there even are any in NW3 and above. So I realized, how do I apply this and how do I teach this to my clients so that they really understand what to do? And so that's really what led me back to more training. Initially, I went and I was like, I want to really be a happy, joyful competitor. And I found myself in nose work in the beginning and in freestyle to be more of an intermittent competitor.
Mm-hmm.
I would go out some days and I'd feel great and I'd do great, and I'd go out other days and I'd be nervous and I wouldn't do so well. And I never knew, how I was going to show up that day. And so I thought I need to have more control over what
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking when I'm on my trial day because I do great in practice. So and I want to enjoy it and have fun and really let this be something, a ribbon at the end would be great, but I want this awesome connection and experience with my dog for both of us because, of course, the dogs key into how we're feeling. And so that's what really led me to mental management. And I'll never forget, I no sooner went through that initial program. I remember I called Chuck, my husband, and I forgot about the time change. So it was like 5 o'clock in the morning in California. And I'm like, they're going to offer a certification, Chuck. We've got to do it. You're going to love this stuff. I was just that excited when I went to learn mental management with you all at in Texas. And so I immediately wanted to offer that to others because
Mm-hmm.
I want everybody to go out and literally do their best as a handler, help facilitate their dog's abilities, which are probably already there, because sometimes we as handlers do get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted everybody to really enjoy it. I don't think it's fun to go to competition and be nervous all day.
Oh,
I
no.
think it's fun to go to competition and go, hey, we're here to do this. We're having a good time. We're ready. And then whatever happens, you're either going, I always tell my people, my own clients, and I usually mention it even as a certifying official at trial, there's only a couple things that can happen here today. You're either going to have a day where you walk away with a ribbon or a placement or a
Mm-hmm.
qualifying score, or you're going to walk away learning something that's going to help you in every trial from here on out. So it's a win. either way. And that's an exciting attitude to go in and play with your dog in a competition, I think.
What is the most common question you get asked by students?
What people are often most concerned about is that there's some things that we inadvertently do as handlers in nose work that probably contribute to most of the mistakes that are made. And I will tell you that I think in general, for people who have gone through the foundation training and really taken the time to train their dog and are going into a competition feeling like they're really ready, um, the biggest thing that can happen is things like what we call a blurt alert. In other words, you can go in and the dog is searching, and they have definitely hit the odor cone. They're in odor, but the dog hasn't made the commitment yet. Although the handler kind of jumps the gun and calls the alert early before the dog's really finished searching. So to me, a blurt alert, really getting your alert out there, calling it before the dog was ready, that's a handler error generally. Dogs can make a mistake, but we can have what we call a false alert in nose work, where the dog alerts, but not where the source of the odor is. So there's a lot to learn about letting the dog finish their search and making sure you recognize their body language, that they're really giving you the commitment. This is where the odor is. And I think blurt alerts are purely when people are nervous and that kind of thing. So I think that's something people want to know about. The other thing people ask me a lot about is when we get into the reload, the reinforcement phase, where we're working with our mental game after the fact. And let's say someone's day wasn't their very best day. Let's say they, as a handler, made a mistake. We talk about what they can do in mental management to work on that. They can evaluate the action, identify what they need to work on. And let's say you were out and you were doing an elite hide with a 7-foot elevated hide, and your dog didn't get it. And you're walking out thinking, oh man. Well, how people want to know, how do I not beat myself up over that? How do I not feel bad about that? Because we take it very seriously, us and our dogs. We've been working, we know they're talented, and you want to do your best out there. So people often want to know, how do I really do that? And we talk about the mental management that we've learned for that, to evaluate the action, find out what you have to work on. You can revisualize it in your mind, make it positive, and then you have to let it go. And people want to know, how do I let that go? And it's something we learn. We learn mental management, and we learn how to do those things by doing them. I always tell people, practice your mental management every day. It doesn't have to always be at nose work. You can practice it with a phone call with your mother-in-law, if that's difficult for you, or if you have to go in and have a difficult conversation with a client about something. Practice your mental management a lot, and you'll become better at every single step, including how to let go of it if a mistake has been made or something didn't go as you hoped it would, and turn that into, wow, I've got this to learn. I'm going to tackle that. We're going to do well at that. And then that's cleaned up. And it really helps.
I found that the majority of people, they come to us with one concern, right? I want to use this for this particular sport in this particular circumstance. And then they walk away and they use it in their everyday life and other personal goals and adventures that they have coming up. And to me, that's why we do what we do, is to be able to help people become better humans, not necessarily just become successful in that one sport. So for you personally, has there been any place in which you've been able to utilize the system that you didn't expect and that enhanced your life in some way?
Yes, I used it all the time in my business as a business owner running a dog training facility. So anytime that I had to have a more difficult conversation with a client or help them to understand more realistic expectations about whatever was going on with their dog, I would often use mental management before I'd go into that conversation with them. And I felt it just really helped me to be really positive and to speak to their listening.
What specific thing would you do that, when you say applying mental management, what do you mean? What would you do?
Well, I would often do some visualization.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I knew that I was going to be meeting with a client about something that they were struggling with in some way. And so I just visualized the conversation going really well and often visualize myself feeling really good about how we communicated in that conversation. So it just put me in a really positive state of mind as I spoke with them.
So you would literally mentally rehearse what you wanted to say, maybe even role play, like what they might say, how you would
Yep,
respond, because we want to respond, not react in situations. So you would really
exactly.
rehearse this scenario. I think anybody can use that. If you're going
Yeah.
in, you're going to talk to a teacher about a bad grade. You're going to have a conversation with your significant other about some sort of challenge. Like there's so many ways that you can use mental rehearsal and being prepared in those moments. It reminds
Yes.
me of the principle of the picture. Because it's
Uh-huh.
not important what we say, but what we cause ourselves or others to picture is critical. And it's one of my favorite principles of mental management. And it's something you need to consider. Like, what is that other person going to see in their mind when you use certain words or the way in which you present something? And so you're able to kind of run through that and imagine what are these pictures going to be for them and make sure that that conversation is beneficial. Love,
Yes.
love, love, love that. And you can use that in your everyday life all of the
Yes, you
time. That's
can.
a great insight. I love it. So that's what's so exciting to me is that when you come to train on the mental game, you're not training for just one area of your life. You're actually training for every circumstance that could be stressful, every time that you could have an interesting interaction. And so we talk about so many different things. Now, there's one thing that we haven't touched on that I just want to because I find it fascinating. You've done work in prisons. And so,
Mhm.
can you explain what you've done in prisons that's been beneficial?
Well, that turned out to be a really fun series of seminars. It wouldn't sound like it, and it was. The organization, a really wonderful organization, who bought my dog training business, runs several businesses. They have a doggy boarding facility, and they have several other. It's all a not-for-profit organization. But what we all support is a program called New Life Canines, and that's where service dogs are trained in the prison system by the folks who are incarcerated,
Mm-hmm.
and they train service dogs, and then those service dogs are given to military or first responders with PTSD or traumatic brain disorders, which is a really wonderful cause. And they asked me to go in and speak with the men who were raising and training the dogs in the prisons. And so it was my first time to do something like that. And I've got to tell you, these people were like a sponge.
Mm.
They were so happy to learn about mental management and how to use it. And many of them, in addition to what they do with the dogs, because they do the training and, they have to show that the dogs are trained. There's a whole process of graduating where the dogs are turned over to the new recipient. And it's a very emotional thing. The men become very attached to these
Mm-hmm.
dogs, and they're really wanting to do it to help these people that are in need. And the whole thing was just awesome. And many of the men, when we got to working on our self-image
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, it was really important because they were wanting to work on their interview if they were coming up for parole and some different things like that that was not related directly again to the program. So I got a lot of really positive feedback on that, on how helpful that was for the guys that were handling the dogs, and it was really a fulfilling project.
So, from all your years as a coach, whether it be on the mental game or technical, what is your best advice to someone?
Well, my best advice to folks is really be with what you know.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, sometimes what happens with people, even with their dogs, that's where most of my work has been with people with their dogs. And whether it's a sport we're doing or hanging around the house or bringing a new dog into the house, we just want to really be balanced in the way we're thinking about things and be realistic, because I think unrealistic expectations
Mm-hmm.
or pushing things beyond where they are when we're working with dogs is is one of the bigger problems. So in competition, that can be anything from somebody, taking, let's say, a fearful dog out into competition and deciding to do that. You just have to realize there's going to be more time and work involved in helping the dog with their sensitivities as well. And you have to be ready to deal with that. Those kinds of things, and being realistic about what your dog can do. I've had situations where I've had to tell people, I don't think that your dog is going to be happy competing in that kind of environment because of such sensitivities or aggression or whatever might be going on. And why would you want to push that on them? And then other people are sometimes in a really, really, really big hurry. And I think that goes across dog sports. And just helping people to be balanced in their thinking and really taking a look at what they want and why they want it. And to just, do a little goal setting, lay out the plans about how they're going to do it. And the nice thing is mental management encompasses all of that.
Teah, what is your favorite mental management principle?
Well, there's so many. I love so many of them. My really favorite one that I use so much is the principle of reinforcement, which is the one that says every time you think about, write about, or talk about something, you improve the probability of that thing happening. And I think that's just critical. So I really use that a lot.
It has that, when you learned that principle, how did that impact you?
Well, I actually had been working on a lot of self-help kind of things in my life since the time I was pretty young, like 18. And it just really spoke to my listening. Like I thought, oh my gosh, it's just so true. I need to remember that every time I think, write, talk about, visualize something, if I'll make it positive, the probability of that happening is so much greater than if I'm putting my thoughts on things that are not supportive, that aren't going to help me.
I know one thing that I'll do when I'm doing a seminar, I'll tell the principal, the more you think about, talk about, or write about something happening, you improve the probability of that thing happening. And I'll say that principle. And I said, so should we ever think about, talk about, or write about what we don't want? And then automatically there is like this, wait, no, we shouldn't. Like there's this reaction to that. And then all of a sudden it's, well, but we do. And what if we replace that temptation to focus on and worry about what we don't want with what if we think about, talk about, and write about what we do want? How does our life change? How do we enhance who we are and what we're able to accomplish with one simple principle?
Yes. You're going to really power. I mean, they're all great. There's so much power in them, but that's the one that I'd say I use the most.
And we're going to be thinking, talking, and writing anyway. So if we can just adjust what it is we focus on and that we talk about to others and that we write down for ourselves, it's the reason the performance analysis is so incredibly important, is because it's designed in order to force you to write down your successes. And so it almost elevates this principle.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite product?
Well, of course, With Winning in Mind is just an incredible book with so much information and reference. And yet my very favorite is Freedom Flight.
Me too.
I've read that many times. And again, I've read a lot of inspirational books in my life. And that's on my very top of my list as an inspirational book. So I love Freedom Flight because it is based on real life circumstances that occurred. And to me, when I first read it, I just felt like, now I really do get this. And so I think it's wonderful.
I think the interesting thing about Freedom Flight is what it does to the reader. Because there's this, so the person in the story, which I'm not spoiling the story, but the person in the story had their own kind of freedom flight. And so, but Dad's not talking about that person's freedom flight or flight to freedom, which is essentially what it was. He's talking about this airline flight that my father was on was my dad's freedom flight because of the interaction that he had with this individual. And it's based on some of that conversation and being able to apply some of the principles that he's learned. And Dad kind of made it where it's inspired by a true story. It's not necessarily 100%
not
true.
Every single thing, but
there's truth in it, and the principles are powerful. And there's only, I think, one principle that's repeated and with winning in mind. I think the rest of them are different principles. And so therefore you're able to go in, or we're going to call them lessons, right? So you will be able to take, and it's so short. It's literally like a 70-minute read. Like you can read it in one setting. You are not only going to read it one time though.
I've read it many times.
Over and over.
I've read that one many times. And it's really, really inspirational.
Sometimes I will do a training session where I will take a group of people, and all we do is they have to read with Freedom Flight. They read Freedom Flight ahead of time, and then we sit and we discuss it. And that is the session. It is the most powerful thing. And I highly recommend it because I'll do it with pageant participants most of the time, but it's really great even with younger people. So if anyone's interested in a session like that, let me know. It's a really powerful way to spend about an hour. And they spend about an hour reading the book ahead of time. And then we come together and we discuss how it applies to whatever that journey is for them. I'm so excited to get to talk to you more for our Patreon members, because what I really want to do is talk about some of these more detailed things that you do. Like, what do you do when you're in your car and you're waiting in between the searches? And then also when you transition from one dog to another, how do you handle that difference? Because it's almost like starting all over again. And how do you mentally handle that? So what I want to do is be able to spend a little more time with you for our Patreon members. If you're not already a Patreon member, please consider signing up so that you can hear more from Teah for our silver and gold level members. Teah, I want to thank you so much for your time. I think my biggest takeaway from this particular interview and session was that wherever you are in the moment, to be really honest about what's currently true. So when you're setting your goals, you're setting them appropriately. That's what I heard you say. I hope that's what you meant, because to me, that's so incredibly important, and people are in too much of a hurry to get where they're going. And if you apply mental management to your life and to your journey, whether you're in dog sports or otherwise, you're going to get further faster.
Yes, that's the interesting thing. Mm-hmm. If you'll just be realistic about it and set your goals and do it in a certain way, often you achieve what you want to achieve.
If someone is, one more thing, if someone is interested in getting involved in nose work or getting to work with you, what do they need to do?
Well, they can get on my website, which is noseworkmind.com, and I can talk to them from there. So I'm happy to do seminars. I do quite a few of those around the country. I used to do a lot in person. I do many more by Zoom now. Mm-hmm. And I also just do private coaching when people need some help with what's going on for them in their mental game. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me, noseworkmind.com.
So if you're interested in working with Teah, whether it's with your dog or without, give her a holler. She's in California, but she can help you from anywhere. Thank you so much, Teah. Y'all have a blessed rest of your day. Like this episode. If you do, share it with a friend. If you know someone who's in nose work, who's interested in nose work, this would be a great episode for them. Y'all have a great day.